And welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn with a look at your headlines today. The Senate approves a GOP budget that has its sights set on Obamacare. The measure is aimed at creating a balanced budget over the next 10 years. But to achieve that, lawmakers will need to make cuts to programs like Medicaid and food stamps. The budget also allows Republicans to draft regulation to repeal President Obama's health care law. Lawmakers in a dozen states are weighing whether to raise taxes. Officials say it's needed for improvements in things like infrastructure and education. But in Michigan, voters shot down a proposed tax hike yesterday. A Florida woman saves herself and her children from a knife-wielding man by ordering a pizza.
It says, "Please help, get 911 to me." And then she placed an order, put a pizza order on it, and then it says 911 hostage help.
The woman placed the order through a mobile app. Police say the family was taken captive by the mother's boyfriend. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker leads the GOP pack among likely Republican voters in Iowa. That's according to the latest Quinnipiac poll. You can see those numbers right here. 21% of Iowa's caucus goers support Walker. That's at least 8 percentage points higher than his closest opponents. And if you're at least 16 years old and live in Hyattsville, Maryland, you can now cast a ballot for your favorite local politicians. Teenagers were at the polls yesterday voting for that town's mayor and city council members. Officials there changed the voting age earlier this year.
All right, joining us right now on set is Washington Times columnist Tim Constantine. Tim, we've talked the last couple of weeks from Washington, D.C. Great to have you here with us in the studio.
Thanks very much.
All right, so you got a new column out talking about the fiction of global warming, a hotly contested debate. What's your take on this?
Well, I get an email this past week from Next Gen, which is Tom Steyer, the billionaires group, and it says immediately, first paragraph, it takes to task Republicans, conservatives, and Marco Rubio for the fictional story they are telling. And then it goes on, and pretty much the rest of the email is fiction. So it really kind of got my ire up, and thus the column.
And what specifically was so obvious about his email that really just rankled your feathers?
Well, there are some little things. The statistic about the 97% of all scientists agree is just, it's a wonderful line, but there's no truth to it. So that's an easy one, but there's other pieces in there as well that some of them are more complex. Some of them have to do with data, raw data versus actual, they've adjusted the numbers in global warming. And so when you start looking at the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NASA, both of them, by the way, have had to go back and say, oops, well, we did adjust the numbers, let's fix them again. But when you look at the raw data, it's not warmer. It's not. And then the best part is the henny penny, the sky is falling. We've had deadlines for the last 10 or 15 years that if we don't take action in the next 5 years, such and such will happen. If we don't take action. And 2015 has been the deadline for a bunch of those. And here we are, we just came off the coldest winter on record.
Right. And there was a recent Duke University study that, again, went back to some of those same facts and said, look, this is not happening at the same pace at which we thought it once was.
Yeah, none of the models have happened, none of the predictions have happened, so let's reel it in a little bit.
All right, well, recently also we talked about Carlos Curbelo, a Florida congressman, and he came out supporting President Obama on this issue of global warming. Of course, we know he's from South Florida. South Florida, Miami specifically, has spent millions of dollars on certain aspects of this. What do you think is behind his push?
Well, see, I have this theory because I have a home in Florida and I live about 8 miles inland, so I'm actually rooting in favor of global warming, hoping that by the time I retire, I will have beachfront property. So, no, I say that jokingly because I think, there's a movement, there is a certain segment of the population that buys into this hook, line, and sinker, but unfortunately, when you lay out the factual data, it simply doesn't match the hyperbole.
Yeah, and you're not the only skeptic out there. Of course, there are others. There's the Daily Caller's Michael Bastich. He wrote, quote, "It seems like every year the tipping point is close to being reached." Exactly what you were talking about right there.
It's a great item, and it's suitable for debate. And in the column today, they just published in the Washington Times this morning, and there were already several people that were quoting different scientific journals and so on, trying to go back and forth. But again, when you say that 97% of the scientists agree to this, except the folks that put that statistic together are the ones that already agree, and they decide who's included and who's not. I said, let's do a roll call vote. You know, there are professors from Harvard and Princeton. There's the guy that founded the Weather Channel. There's all kinds of folks that are well trained in this that don't buy it. So let's do a real check.
I know a lot of meteorologists out there, not climatologists, but meteorologists say, look, we have a hard enough time predicting what's going to happen in the next week or so, let alone, you know, years from now. So interesting stuff. Tim Constantine's going to stick around with us. We're going to be back for our roundtable discussion, talk a little bit more about Hillary's big announcement yesterday and some other stuff making some news around Washington and elsewhere. And also, we're going to talk about the need for speed and the need for cash, how the new presidential candidates are stacking up in the race for donor dollars. We'll take a look at who's topping our new Money Bombs list and who's got the biggest war chest out there. Plus, Democrats blasting President Obama over a new trade agreement. And some big-name Republicans are backing the president on this. What in the world is going on here?